Hello friends, Dave Paulides, Keenan, Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. This is a missing person segment and some letters, and we'll get into it. Before I start today, I want to say that it's been a very strange summer so far. I can tell you that the visitation rate to Glacier National Park and the northern part of the Flathead Valley, it might be down maybe 5% from last year, but we're hitting near record numbers of visitations. So people visiting national parks, I don't think is down. I may prove to be wrong, maybe it's 10% down, but that's still record numbers compared to a couple years ago. And why am I telling you this? Because the strange part is there's been very, very few cases of missing people. And I've been tracking this for, our research goes back 400 years. I think this is a year where there's been fewer people missing that fit our profile than in any time in recent history. But to the other end of that, I've had a lot of people contact me just in the last couple of weeks and say, Dave, we have a weird feeling in the air. Something's not right. You need to be careful. You and Angie need to really be on the ball. Yeah, it doesn't feel right. I gotta admit that. But it hasn't felt right for me for about the last year. But just lately it's gotten worse. And I don't like people to just talk about feelings. So I like to talk about facts. And the fact is that there's something odd going on in the world right now. Whether you want to call it a spiritual change, a religious awakening, something is changing. And I usually can't feel anything. My head's pretty thick. But I could feel the change. And that's about all I'll say about it, other than I'm being much more careful these days. I know my friends are as well. And most of my friends are very, very low-key. They're not like me. They say, Dave, maybe you ought to pull your head down below ground level for a while. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. But I'm going to be careful. And I want you to be careful as well. On to the letters. This comes from a very, very good friend of mine. Hey Dave, watching your August 7th, 2022 video and the story of the orange orb that the pilots told you about, pilots flying out of Monterey, saw an orb fly up next to a private jet. I mentioned an orange orb to you in a July 31st email titled Praying Mantis Alien Story Sparks of Memory. It was a rainy day in Dublin, California. My house was at 8577 Deervale Road, Dublin. The rain subsided, so I got on my skateboard and traveled south on Deervale toward the intersection of Galindo and Deervale Road. I noticed a pulsing orange light to my left on the wet surface of Deervale Road. I was on the west side of San Francisco Bay, side of Deervale, skateboarding on the sidewalk. I looked up and saw an orange orb pulsing. I wasn't scared. In fact, it felt a very friendly, happy feeling from what I thought must have been an alien inside what I thought was a craft. The feeling was that the pilot in the craft was playful and youthful, maybe like me. I was about 10 years old, I think, maybe 12. I remember looking north up Deervale, looking for someone else who might co-witness this cool craft. Deervale was strangely still. Not a person as far as I could see, no cars, sounds, nothing. Just the pulsing orange craft and a skateboard Steve. The craft was hovering over a streetlight pole. As I recall, the pole was green, made of metal, and had a green arm that reached over the street. that had a downward pointing light at the end. The craft was just behind and above the pole part of the light pole. Without warning, and suddenly, the craft shot from above the pole location to Mount Diablo at breathtaking speed, probably less than a second from the pole to Mount Diablo. I've considered that the craft may have also gone from its maybe 10-foot diameter down to a little dot by shrinking or going through a portal, giving the illusion to travel from the pole to Mount Diablo. Look at what Diablo means in Spanish. Either or something else I'm not cognizant of could have created this appearance of traversing about 12 miles in under a second. I told my dad, and he told me I might be watching too much of that space show, Star Trek, that had begun airing in '66. I was born in '54, so would have been 12 years old. I have often thought of the great friendly feelings that came from that craft. It seemed like the intelligence inside was youthful and the equivalent of my age. I thought maybe it was interested in skateboarding. It seemed curious and friendly, like I'm meeting a new, nice friend for the first time. I kept the notion that this craft, but since reading about Skinwalker Ranch and orbs, I've started to think that the orb was actually a being. Maybe even called back by its parents. Probably a child's thinking as I wondered why it sped away so abruptly. The sighting was at about 8413 Deervale Road, Dublin. Google gives a distance from that location to Mount Diablo at 22 miles. A straight path would be less distance. I solemnly swear to you that the above was a truthful account of what happened. Thanks, Steve. So Steve's a police officer, a friend of mine, great guy, and I believe it 100% because I know him. How many thousands of people in this world have had an encounter with an orb like that? And his description of his feelings about it, does the orb have the ability to make you feel what they want you to feel? I don't know. Next letter. Hey Dave, I'm a relatively recent follower of your work. So I first wanted to say thank you for your effort and dedication to the missing. I appreciate your passion and hard work raising awareness for such a worthy cause. I consider myself an open-minded skeptic when it comes to things like paranormal, UAP, UFO, Bigfoot, etc. It wasn't until last year that I had a moment that caused me to pause and think. Thought I would share this story with you concerning a blue orb encounter I had when I was younger. So we had orange, now we're talking about blue. I'm coming upon 60 years of age, and this encounter happened when I was in my mid-teens, so a number of years ago. The story itself is rather short. It was late at night. Everyone was asleep, which included myself and my parents, whose room was across the hall from mine. We lived in a split-level house, and the position of my bed provided me a view down the hall towards the stairs. I don't recall if I was having trouble sleeping or if I woke up, but I saw a slightly bigger than softball-sized blue orb drift up from the stairs. Coming down the hall towards our rooms. I lost sight of it as it turned towards my parents' room, and I don't recall anything after that. For years and years, I always considered it just a dream. Granted, one that has stuck with me and never forgot, which in and of itself seems rather significant or odd. It wasn't until last year while reading Skinwalkers at the Pentagon when the book described some of the effects that have been diagnosed from contact with the phenomena. I absolutely froze and got chills when I read that rheumatoid diseases and myasthenia gravis were on the list. Yeah, but that was only involving blue orbs, or was only involving, I'll get to that. You see, my mother was diagnosed and suffered from rheumatoid arthritis while living in that house. She would end up passing away years later in 2007 from complications from RA. While RA is fairly common and not too surprising, myasthenia gravis is not. My father was diagnosed with that and would end up passing away from complications in 2009. To say the least, I'm a bit more convinced now that I have experienced was not a dream, and can't help but think that there was a connection between the blue orb encounter and my parents' diagnosis. There's a lot to digest in the Skinwalker book and show. I'm not sure if I buy into or believe all of it, but I do feel there's something going on, and I hope one day we figure it out. Please continue the great work and look forward to seeing you when it takes you, where it takes you. It's okay to be a skeptic. Healthy dose of skepticism probably may keep us alive in certain instances. Next letter. Hey Dave, it's been a long while since I emailed you. I'm watching your most recent video, the second Skinwalker Ranch book review. In it you discussed blue orbs, and I thought I should share my experience with you. Through the 2000-2008 school year, I attended Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. If you've never been to Ashland, it's a beautiful little town just north of the California border. For my freshman year of college, it was a year in which I would have many encounters with things of high strangeness. This is quite a bit leading up to my encounter with a blue orb, but I will elaborate on that if you request and skip it to now to save you time. I hope you have some time to read. I'd been struggling in my math class for not for contemplation, but for lack of sleep, stress, and other factors getting in my way of my productivity. I had an assignment that turning in would secure a passing grade, but fail me if I didn't do so. I'd completed that assignment, but it was late at night, and my only option was to have the assignment turned in my professor's mailbox outside of his office for him to receive first thing in the morning. I can't recall exactly why, but something made me feel that I had to turn it in that night. At that time, I was a practicing Christian of no particular denomination. I don't recall the details as to why I felt I needed to pray for protection, but I did so and I set off across the campus. It was very dark despite the numerous lights set up along the walkways through the campus. Furthermore, I didn't know where I was actually going and no one was around to ask. But I wanted a challenge to test my spiritual state, and at that time my walk with God, I decided that would lead me to where I needed to go. My dormitory building was across the street from the main part of the campus. Crossing the street, I would follow the walkway, first leading to a building that I knew was not the one. It was where my German class was held. This particular building is several stories high. I want to say at least 4 floors. The windows were filled with darkness and the building was locked, passing by it as I felt pulled in a particular direction. I had a troubled sense from the building arrive all at once for no preconceived idea. Walking around the building, there was suddenly a violent slamming of something against an upstairs window, 3rd or 4th floor, over and over again. I looked up to see total darkness in the window and a pull curtain partially lowered. This curtain was moving as the window was being struck. It was as though someone was slamming their hands against the window to startle me. Something insisted, like a kind of mind speak, that I should not entertain it and I should proceed. I muttered some words to the source of the slamming, and upon the building being left behind me as I walked, sound suddenly stopped. Side note, there were no reports of any incidents regarding this the following day, so it would seem it wasn't some call for help by someone trapped or an attack inside the building. No one should have been in there anyway, let alone that high up, in a building that had been locked with all lights off for many hours. I proceeded as I was called toward a building amidst a cluster of other similar buildings. I didn't recognize the one I was drawn to, but something about the door told me I was at the right place. I kind of chuckled to myself about my circumstances and fully expected the door to be locked, but I entertained it all the way, and to my surprise, the door easily opened at my attempt. I stood for a moment, a little shocked, made some silly remark, and proceeded into the building. I stood into the dark with what appeared to be a sort of reception area in front of me. There were tiny LED lights from computers and office devices, but they offered no light beyond the little dots that they were. The sentry point was also in the middle of a hall. I looked around and decided I didn't want to use the light from my phone. I wanted to challenge my courage and ability to trust in what was guiding me. A bit silly, I know, but I needed to do it. I closed my eyes to adjust the dark and asked for guidance because I had no idea where I needed to go. I opened my eyes and the darkness didn't improve a lot. The wall behind me and the door itself were made of glass. So the white lamps outside let into a faint bit of light, enough to pollute the dark and make it a little bit difficult to adjust to my vision. I held my head at rest for a moment, waiting for some pull to guide me. And I was made to look up and down the hall to my left, and there was my blue orb. It was several feet away. I guess maybe the size of an eyeball. The color was a mixture of white and blue, but with a dominant blue hue. At the end of the hall were double doors and a vertical window slit, allowing faint light in from a white lamp outside. The light reflected off of a glass-doored cabinet on the wall, in the same location as the blue orb. I realized that I hadn't noticed this blue light before and thought it might be another LED reflecting off the wall-mounted glass. Still, something about it held my attention, though there was no ominous feeling about it. I shifted myself to test the source of the light when it began to move. It was a gentle, fluid movement, and when it went still, it was perfectly still with no bobbing. I then was told via the same mind speak to follow it. I started down the hall, relying on the faint recollections of the light through the door and to see the walls and the floor, and aimed for the gently moving blue orb. The orb moved to the right to a set of stairs, then disappeared. It was given that I should ascend the stairs. With a few paces to go, the double doors at the end of the hall opened, and a man about my age at the time entered. There was more light now, and I was closer to those doors, and I could see he was wearing all black with a flowing jacket and long black hair. He had a pale complexion and a look of agitation in his face as he glared at me and paced right at me. I was moved within to keep walking for the stairs, which meant to proceed in his direction. I felt at peace and proceeded. The man brushed by me and pushed his way through another door. It was a door that opened into what appeared to be another hallway. The door had a vertical window slit, and upon peeking in, there was total darkness aside from a faint bit of light coming from the hall's reflection on an outside lamp. He disappeared into the dark beyond, and the footsteps echoed for only a moment before total silence. No doors, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished. I proceeded up the stairs I was led to, listening to the rest of my time in the building for the guy's whereabouts. I never heard or saw him again. At the top of the stairs, I asked, "Now what?" I was moved a few paces down another hall and was left with no further instruction. I glanced around the dark, and here was a much darker than downstairs. The light coming in was much fainter and came via windows that were few and spaced out. Here I decided to pull out my phone and read a plaque on the door in front of me, and there was my professor's name. I turned my assignment over to his box and waited for a moment. It was time to return to my dorm room for the night, and I felt at peace. I returned by the same way I'd come without a single incident. I listened closely for the stranger, but as I said, I never encountered him again. While walking past the tall building with my German class, the same from which the window slamming came from, I watched that window and saw nothing. As I neared the street from the beginning of my journey, I turned around to face the building again and stared a while, taking it all in. Again, there was nothing. The rest of the night was without incident. I've encountered blue orbs before, but this was the most significant. All encounters I had were of this pure nature, a source of guidance and perhaps protection. Thank you for the read. What I share with you could somehow help place another piece in the puzzle. I'd be happy to elaborate. All the best. Here's what I say about that. Too many things about blue orbs have come up over the years that have been negative. So what if this blue orb was trying to gain acceptance and trust through this person to tell the masses, hey, you can trust us, we're going to be okay? What if the blue orb knew that this person would write something about the positive nature of a blue orb? I don't know. Just thinking outside the box. People know that Angie and I make an inordinate effort not to buy anything Chinese. And I wish you would too. And somebody sent me a great site. It's ChinaNever.com. ChinaEver.com. ChinaNever.com. And in there, it gives you places to go and look for products you may be looking for that weren't made in China. It's an outstanding site. So look it up and try it. Next letter. Hey Dave, hope all is well. There's a gal on YouTube named Blank who's a remote viewer. She works with the police. I listened to a few of her readings on various subjects and she is spot on, even before the event happens. Maybe she could help with the missing. She predicted the capture of the ship Ever Giving, an evergreen cargo container where women and children were kept. The Russians and Green Berets worked together to capture this ship. Sadly, some of the prisoners didn't survive. Dave, please don't make this public, but just listen to her. She was a little scattered in her verbal communications. However, she's the real deal. I'm a retired school teacher, so I don't buy into this crap easily. Please give her a listen. I was blown away at some of the readings and predictions. Okay, I've said this a million times. I'll say it again. I do believe that there's people out there that have a special ability along these lines. I believe there are very few of them. I believe that there's a lot of people who try to take advantage of others. And I've spent and wasted too much of my time chasing these RVers. I have never found a remote viewer to find anybody, ever. So, that's for the record. Having worked with two of the most famous in the world, famous, they both found nobody. One guy said, oh yeah, I helped find so-and-so, and when I called that person's wife, said he was a charlatan, he didn't do anything, he didn't help. As soon as my husband was found, he said he helped find him. That's complete garbage. So, if you know somebody who's a remote viewer, go tell them to find somebody. Go tell them to find them. You don't need me. All the information's in our books, public information. Go find just one. 10 years ago, I said this exact same thing. To date, I can tell you on 2 fingers the number of people that remote viewers have found. None. So, no, I'm not going to waste my time going to anybody. If she has this ability, go find somebody who's missing. I will scream her praises from the rooftops. I will make her a star if she can find people. I don't mean to be rough on these people, but I've heard too much garbage over the years and I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not going to let you be taken advantage by some of these people. Okay, next letter. Hey Dave, I can't figure out who or what is doing these abductions you talk about. UFOs, aliens, our government, Russia, China, naturally occurring opening dimensions and portals, evil beings from another dimension, demons, disgruntled Forest Service Special Agent Stephen Yu. No, he wasn't a Forest Service, he was a National Park Service Special Agent, Stephen Yu. One of the most rude people I've ever talked to on the phone. Now, one of the statements this person made was naturally occurring opening dimension and portals. I will eliminate that from the get-go. Why is that? Because if it was naturally occurring, then we'd be walking down the street in New York, San Francisco, LA, and all of a sudden we'd see somebody disappear right in front of us. But that never happens. Person's last in line, no eyes on them. Child's right next to their parents, eyes aren't on them, they're gone. It's almost like it's directed energy by an intellect at a time when there's no eyes on this person. Point of separation. But if it is demons, then I know why the shoes are always missing. Demons like to mock God. A common component of possession is the person gets severe scratches. These will be 3-inch deep scratch marks. The mockery of the Trinity demons are most powerful at 3 a.m. in mockery of the fact that Jesus died at 3 p.m. The black mass is a mockery of the Catholic Mass with feces, urine taken as communion. Demons will often have possessed the person only to be able to pray with their words in backwards word order in a mockery of God and so forth. When God called to Moses from the burning bush, the first thing God told him was, quote, "Take your sandals off," Exodus 3:5. Some 40 years later, when God appeared to Joshua as the Israelites besieged Jericho, he again said, quote, "Take your sandal off your foot," Joshua 5:15. A sign of reverence and respect, taking off your sandals was like the old custom of a man taking off his hat when entering a building or greeting a lady. It was a token of respect. The ground was holy because of God's presence. People were to approach God with solemnity and humility. Taking off your sandals expressed an inward reverence through an outward behavior in their worship. Showing such respect avoids anything casual, sloppy, or rude. So taking off the victim's shoes, the demons are mocking God. I think that's interesting. But I also think, just the facts, what's the one item on your body that has the most bacteria? Shoes. So if you're going to an environment that's clean, or you're going to an environment that has entities that aren't used to the viruses and things we have, maybe they want all that stuff off. Just saying. Final letter. Hey Dave, I've always loved your Missing 411 episodes. I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I have to say I agree with many of the things you say. However, my email is to say that my heart aches for you regarding Ben. I've sat here crying. When I was married, my stepson Josh committed suicide when he was 13. Going through that was quite the journey. It was so weird because people say you always have signs, and I agree. There are those situations. But I did not see, nor did any of us, that one coming. Coincidentally, it was our wedding anniversary when it happened. People would ask if we thought he did it on purpose that day. No, he didn't even know our birth dates at that age, but still, coincidence for sure. Years have passed, and this February 9th, I went out to a cemetery. Hadn't been since he passed. I was the only person in the cemetery, and it was in the 20s with a brisk wind. I live in Colorado Springs, and well, you know how that can be. Here's what amazed me. I've lived in Colorado Springs for a long time. I still remember the day in February, and I remember looking up at Pikes Peak from the cemetery and just how everything looked. And here it was 20 years later, and it was exactly the same. I mean, seriously, could have been that very day. The only thing that had changed were more headstones. The reality of time hit me really hard that day, really hard. A huge wave of sadness overcame me. And like you shared from the river today, I really hope that I would have contributed and still contributed to his life in the right ways. I'm 64 now, and I've always been super outdoorsy and fit. I used to do a lot of trail running for years. Did the Pikes Peak Marathon up and down for years as well, and I've even placed in the top 10 of women. That's admirable. I think I like the training on the trails and mountains more than anything, though. And I have to say that I was not so smart at times running alone remotely. Yeah, people knew where I was. I took a cell phone, food, water, etc. But now I'm just grateful to God that I remained safe. Now I never go to the trails without a gun. How times have changed, meaning I have changed and have become wiser in that respect. That said, this whole last year has been awful, and I felt a spiritual oppression that is literally palpable. Kind of what I talked about at the beginning of this segment. I believe we are in major spiritual warfare right now. I'm seeing it more and more in obvious ways. My son just turned 30 and has lived in the island of Kauai for the last 2 years. He struggled with depression throughout his 20s mostly, and he literally was the most negative individual I have ever known, which is not what you want to share about your son. I've been on my knees, and I'm still about and for him. Probably the worst pain in my life has been when he was in emotional agony. Yeah, I know that. I know that. Parents out there, we know that about our kids. The greatest pain is not being able to help them. It's horrible. Now, he is the one that I would have not been shocked if he had committed suicide. As yes, telling me that every moment of his life he is miserable. But again, it was Josh, his half-brother, that actually did it. Again, at 13, so young. I'll continue to surround my son with prayers. I love him so much, and he is doing better than he was a few years ago. Hawaii is definitely working for him, but it's been a rough road for him for sure. Thanks for all your transparency, Dave, along with all the others you shared. I will also keep you in my prayers as well. Hang in there, brother. Much love and respect. I'm sure you've heard me say this, but tell your son to get into a NAMI, N-A-M-I, social group, and they support each other. And I guarantee that if you can get him to sit through one of these episodes that's an hour long, it'll change his view on what can really help him. Again, I went through a 12-week class. I learned more in that class than I ever learned in any college class. And NAMI are the experts. And even if you have anyone in your family that's going through a mental health crisis or just mood depression, go to NAMI. And I know that they're pretty filled up right now because of what's going on in our world, but don't give up on it. Get there. So, I have 3 specific missing 411 cases for you today. But before I get into that, in some of our research, we came across this story. And I can't call it a 411 case, although it's really close. There's not enough information about it. There wasn't enough follow-up, etc. But I found the story fascinating because it was written by a professional writer about what happened and what evolved as he was there. The story is Missing Guide Believed to be Dead. It was written by a man named Bill Quimby, who was an outdoor editor for the Tucson Citizen in Tucson, Arizona. Dateline Little Martin Lake, Northwest Territories, Canada. A hunting and fishing trip in this wilderness site a few miles south of the Arctic Circle began with a terrible tragedy. Tim Lauer, an oil company geologist from Los Angeles, and I left the town of Yellowknife about noon on August 24th, and that would be 1989, in a float plane packed with 10 days worth of supplies, food, fuel, and luggage for 9 people. The 180-mile flight northeast from Great Slave Lake and the capital of the Northwest Territories took exactly 2 hours in the twin-engined Otter, taking us over many hundreds of smaller lakes and mile after mile of tundra-covered ridges that had been pushed up by the Ice Age glaciers. 2 hours after the cargo and the 2 of us were dropped off in a rainstorm at our camp, another float plane brought our camp's 2 other hunters, Eric and Susie Chabreri of Paris, France. Also in the second plane were guides Charlie Nitsiza and Ed Abel, plus Abel's wife Eileen, cook Joan Cotton, and our outfitter Bill Tate of Canada North Expeditions. Unpacking and setting up camp kept everyone busy for the next 90 minutes. At about 6 p.m., Nitsiza, the guide assigned to Lauer and me, announced he was going for a quote-unquote walk, and there's quotes around that. The rain had stopped, but it was still cold. Little Martin Lake was covered with whitecaps. As aliens, we were prohibited from hunting on the same day as we had flown in, according to Canada's wildlife laws. Members of the Indian tribe in the far north apparently are exempted, so we were not surprised when Nitsiza asked for help in attaching a sling to his rifle. Everyone had seen caribou from the air while we were circling the lake, and we suspected our guide wanted to do some hunting for himself before taking us out the next day. A solo hunt would not be the only reason that Siza would want to carry a rifle. The region is home for barren ground grizzly bear, an especially aggressive subspecies of brown bear. Although these bear are protected here, another guide was forced to kill one at point-blank range when it charged him at Little Martin Lake during the '88 season. Everyone knew not to stray far from a rifle, even while in camp. Sundown comes at 10:30 p.m. at this time of the year this far north, and it was about 8:30 or 9:30 when I began watching the caribou that could be seen feeding near camp through my binoculars. I was surprised to see a boat beached a half-mile across the lake. It had been so windy that we had not heard Siza launch the 20-foot flat-bottom wooden boat or start a 25-horsepower outboard motor. All of us thought he left camp on foot. We weren't too concerned when he missed supper and didn't return that night. Tate said Siza had guided the previous 2 seasons from his camp, so the chances were very slim that he would have become lost. Perhaps he had killed a caribou and decided to spend the night with it. When he didn't return the next morning, Tate, Lauer, and I went looking for our missing guide. We found the bow of his boat barely on the rocks, as if it had been hastily beached or had been blown to the shore by the wind. There was no rope, so it didn't alarm us to see that the boat wasn't tied up. But the motor shaft still was in the water, and a life jacket, the rifle, and an unopened container of apple juice were on the floor of the boat. A glove was floating nearby. Charlie wouldn't leave his boat without that rifle, Tate said, and he would have lifted the motor. There was some water in the back of the boat, but no more than might have leaked into it during the night rain. We searched the area for footprints, but found no sign that the man ever had reached shore. That afternoon, Tate sent a radio message to the RCMP. All things indicated that our guide had fallen out of the boat and drowned. A Mountie arrived by float plane the next day, inspected the site, and took statements from everyone around. Then he radioed his office. He too believed that Siza was dead. 2 more Mounties flew in to join him, and after borrowing a boat from our camp, they began dragging the lake with grappling hooks. Radio messages from our camp eventually reached Yellowknife, and the story made page 1 of the Northwest Territories weekly newspaper. Over the next few days, 28 members of the Dog Rib Indian Nation arrived from a community about 100 miles north of Little Martin Lake. 13 came in 3 small boats, and they had portage between the many lakes along the way. The others, including Charlie Siza's parents and brother, came in a chartered float plane. The Royal Canadian Air Force also sent a plane to search the area from the air. During the search, Tate and a Mountie found Siza's other glove and his hat in the lake. As of September 2nd, searchers still were dragging Little Martin Lake. They did not have much hope in finding Siza's body. However, it is a big lake, and its water is so cold that it might take years for a drowning victim to surface, they said. I read that. And there were some subtle things that Bill wrote in that article that keyed on me. He told everyone he was going for a walk, a short walk. Nobody heard the motor start. Nobody saw the boat leave. Friends, it's those subtle type of things when somebody writes that you need to pay attention to. Now, I looked up Little Martin Lake on Google Earth. There's hundreds of thousands of small bodies of water in this part of the Northwest Territories. I've been to Yellowknife. Not much to that town. It is the headquarters for 3 major diamond mines in Canada. And I went there to talk to them about technology I was representing for a company. They were good meetings, really good people up there. Mosquitoes are off the chart bad. They had a huge ice rink facility up there. I think it was 4 rinks. And I knew that because Ben was playing back then, and I just kind of keyed on every ice rink I went by. It's in the middle of nowhere. Yellowknife is out there in the middle of nowhere. So where Bill Quimby went to this Little Martin Lake, was really in the middle of nowhere. I'm sure the fishing was off the hook, and I'm sure the caribou hunting that they were going after was really good. A lot of things about this. Again, he didn't say he was going to go out on the lake. And Siza was smart. He'd been a guide there for 2 years prior. There were whitecaps on the lake. The wind was blowing hard. Doesn't make sense that he said one thing and would do another, and then they not hear or see the boat leaving. Sorry. I keyed on it, and I can't classify it as a 411 case because too many unknowns. I could never find anything where they said that they found Siza's body. But it's good to see that the RCMP made a big effort to find him. So that was appreciated. And I'm sure the First Nations people appreciated that as well. So, first case I'm going to talk to you about happened in Maine. And it's a very weird case, to say the least. I've said many times in my work that weather is associated with many of the disappearances. And in this case, the weather is the total case, really. So, it involves a man named John Keenan. And I read probably 20 or 30 different articles, and they had him anywhere from 16 to 24 years old. That's how wild the age range was. He went missing September 18th, 1912. He's from Charleston, Massachusetts. And one article stated he was a civil engineer, another stated he was a surveyor. He was employed by the Boston, Maine Electric Railroad. And he was working near the top of Mount Washington in Maine. Now, Mount Washington, look it up, 6,288 feet in elevation. It's very barren at the top, lots of boulders. For a while, it held the world record for the highest wind gust at 231 miles an hour. It's in the Presidential Mountain Range in the White Mountain National Forest. And nowadays, you can drive to the summit. And there's also the Mount Washington Cog Railroad that goes to the summit. And the Appalachian Trail crosses right near there. The mountain is known for having very erratic weather. Now, where is that mountain? So, it's not in Maine, by the way. It's in New Hampshire. But this is the map. This is Mount Washington, White Mountain National Forest. This is the border. Here's Maine over here, and New Hampshire's right here. This is the area where he's from, down in Massachusetts. Not far from a lot of water. Now, John Keenan, he was one of 5 kids in his family. Previously to this job, he worked in Boston. He was on the job site as a surveyor for just 48 hours. But he went missing on September 18th. On September 16th, his mom had gotten a letter from him saying he needed a really warm sweater and some really strong boots or shoes because of the job he'd just taken. Now, the team he was working with stated that he was holding a line rod. And here's the quote from the team leader. Suddenly, a thick cloud rolled in and enveloped them so we couldn't see Keenan. Suddenly, a thick cloud rolled in so we could not see Keenan. The team shouted. They actually fired pistols. Just a short time after that, it started to rain heavy. Wind blew to 50 miles an hour that night. They got off the mountain. John didn't show up. Well, the surveying team contacted law enforcement authorities, and within a day and a half, they had 100 searchers on Mount Washington looking for John Keenan. Now, you got to remember, when you're on a big mountain like that, Which way are you going to go? Downhill. Look for a body of water, you'll eventually get to a residence. Well, those searchers searched for 6 days. They dynamited beaver ponds. They searched all over the mountain. They knew exactly where he was at, and they couldn't even find the lion rod that he was holding, which was very odd. But the company built a monument on the site where they last saw John. Be interesting to see if anyone could ever find that, supposedly on Mount Washington. But what struck me about this story was the weather. Something enveloped him and them, and he disappeared. I classify that as very odd. Very odd. So, next story. The stories today are going to be weird, trust me. Next story involves a man named Jerry Fitzgerald, 29 years old. He went missing February 22nd, 1973 from Apache Junction, Arizona. Now you ask, where is Apache Junction? I asked myself that. And this is Phoenix, Arizona. Apache Junction, almost a suburb. Lost Dutchman State Park mine is right here, but that's Apache Junction. He disappeared in this area by the mine trailhead. Well, he and his wife were from Bettenburg, Iowa, and they were seeing friends in Arizona. And Jerry brought a metal detector with him, and he told his wife that he was going to go out and do some metal detecting out by the Lost Dutchman mine. So on February 22nd, he left. He told his wife he'd be back that night. Following morning, he still hadn't returned, and his wife called the sheriff. She said that he was going to that Lost Dutchman area. And she also said that her husband had a very serious speech impediment that actually made it difficult for him to yell or even sometimes talk. So the sheriff sent a car out, and they found Jerry's vehicle on Peralta Road, right at the Lost Dutchman trailhead, right where it should have been. So the sheriff got together 50 men from 2 different counties to do search and rescue. So on the 23rd and the 24th, they were in the field, got up to almost 100 men on the second day. On February 25th, the third day of the search, Pinal County Sheriff Deputy Jim Morgan was flying a single-engine aircraft looking for Jerry. And he was going to land on a road. When he hit a power line, the plane flipped over and killed Deputy Jim Morgan. February 26th, the sheriff called off the search. Now for those 3 days, what encompassed the search? Arizona Prison Team search effort that includes canines, Arizona Highway Patrol, Maricopa and Pinal County Sheriff's Canines Unit, 71 horse teams, 15 four-wheel drive searched 300 square miles. Why is Jim Morgan's death important? If you're new to this, I have found that there is a highly abnormal number of aircraft that crash in conjunction with searches that I write about. It's very odd. Really odd. I can't explain it. March 30th, 1973, about a month and 8 days after Jerry disappears, the sheriff stated that Jerry Fitzgerald, 29, is still listed as missing, but that he had also heard from Iowa law enforcement that Jerry Fitzgerald was out on bail when he disappeared for grand theft. He allegedly took a stolen tractor from Iowa to Missouri, and he was out on $5,000 bond with a trial scheduled to start. The sheriff called his wife. His wife confirmed that she'd had no contact with Jerry since he disappeared in Arizona. And the best I could tell, he was never brought to trial. Apparently the charges were dropped and he's still listed as a missing person. Now in this case, he's never found. He was a prospector. That's an evolving subgroup that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. There was a plane crash and he had severe genetic disability. Genetic disabilities are something that are pretty common in these cases, and I can't explain why. Prospectors. I probably have close to 10 now that have disappeared and have never been found. Again, it's one of those occupations that you're out in the wilderness alone. You can put yourself in a hazardous situation. Say you're in a cave or something and it comes down and buries you. But that wasn't Jerry's situation. He was going to be outside on the ground. They didn't even find his metal detector, which was odd. Sheriff said he didn't find anything. Now, so this area right over here would be Apache Junction. Plane crash would have been in this area, kind of southeast. And his vehicle was found over here at the Peralta trailhead for the Lost Dutchman mine. Now this distance isn't very far at all, and I'm guessing that the search and rescue headquarters would have been near the highway, so somewhere in this area, plane was landing to discuss where they wanted him to go next. I'm guessing. Deputy Jim Morgan, say a prayer for his family. He left a wife and 2 kids. The final story. It's a doozy. His name was John Keenan. I'm sorry. His name was William Head. William Head, 25 years old. Missing July 14th, 1923. St. Mary's Glacier in Alice, Colorado. He was a jeweler from Denver. And he was originally from Dallas. He had been in Denver now for 4 months. He was extremely trusted, considered an expert jeweler, and for a young man, he was doing very, very well. Now, where did this happen? So, this is Idaho Springs, Colorado, Downeyville. This is Alice, Colorado, and St. Mary's Glacier is up here in this valley. And over in this area, this is Winter Park. I've actually skied Winter Park several times. Great place. Winter Park right there. So this is Silver Plume, Georgetown. Highway 70 is the main route coming from Denver going to the ski resorts up in the mountain. It's a mind-boggling nightmare to drive on Friday nights and Sundays coming back from skiing. It's horrendous. But St. Mary's Glacier, it wouldn't be a place that I would go in the winter, but in July, I'm going to explain what he was doing there. So here's a young person trying to have some fun. And there was a ski tournament going on the glacier on July 4th, 1923. He had a roommate named Arthur Osborne, and he and Arthur drove them in his car up to Alice. And then they took off and they started to hike towards St. Mary's Glacier. Elevation of the glacier is about 10,400 feet. So it would be extremely understandable why both would get tired. It's about a 2-mile hike back then from Alice up to the glacier. 2 or 3 miles. But both guys agreed to meet at the car at 3 o'clock because as they got very close to the glacier, both guys got tired. Osborne said, "Hey, I'm going to take a little bit of a nap." And William said, "Okay." And Huck is in the house. She's a good girl. And Osborne put his head down, taking a nap, and William Head said he was going to take off and he was going to take some pictures with his Kodak camera. So about an hour later, Osborne wakes up, Head's gone, and he starts hiking back to the car. Gets back to the car at about 3 o'clock. William Head's not there. Well, Osborne contacts local police. Police contact the sheriff. Sheriff contacts Forest Service. And pretty soon there's a massive search going on for William Head. Now, police got there on July 4th and Head's car is locked. And they call for search and rescue. So they got planes in, they got ground teams, they got bloodhounds. And from July 5th to July 7th, they had probably 100 people searching for William Head. From the last place that Mr. Osborne saw him, they started there. Now, the search went on for 3 days, nonstop, huge. Then they broke for a couple days. Then on July 11th, they brought in dogs again. And one of the dogs trailed his scent supposedly for 18 miles. And the sheriff, they couldn't find him. And then the sheriff came out on July 24th and said that he feared that there was some type of criminal element that happened to William Head. And he based that on 3 weeks of finding nothing. And I've stated this to you dozens of times while I've made these videos. A typical response from law enforcement is to always think something criminal happened when they can't find the victim. Just the way it is. Now, fast forward 2 years. July 24th, 1925. People are hiking in that area and they come across a body. Really, it's a skeleton. 4 miles from Alice and 2 miles from the Glacier. On the skeletons, they find a wristwatch and laying next to the body, a camera, a Kodak camera. In the pocket of one of the pants are the keys to the Studebaker belonging to William Head. They found his body. They started to search because they figured that they were missing, they couldn't find the head, number one, but you should say in that area there's a lot of animals that would cause predation on the body, mountain lions, bears. Well, on July 28th, they found the skull, a short distance away. And above the right eye on the skull, there was a star-shaped puncture of the skull. The sheriff said that he thought that that star-shaped break in the skull meant that Head might have been killed. Friends, that's a big stretch. It's a big stretch. On July 31st, the sheriff made a public statement that he requested Osborne come back from Nebraska where he lived and be questioned. And they also stated that they were going to make an arrest. Osborne came back. He answered all their questions and nothing else happened. Now the sheriff said publicly on July 28th that he knew that foul play was involved in William Head's death because they found the body in an area that had been previously searched and the body wasn't there. Now you're a 411 follower. How many times has that happened? Yeah. I feel bad for Osborne because he was just a roommate. He was with William Head for the day. And he was looked at as a suspect. But the question remains, how did William Head get lost? Because it would be very hard to get lost on that path. It was well-worn, and I'm sure in 1923 it was a well-worn path, especially with people all up there going back and forth. Now, the real thing that intrigued me was they found the camera. I would have developed the film. I want to see what he took pictures of. There was never a mention of that in any of the articles. Now, Williams Head's mom and dad from Dallas came out and actually participated in the search. Articles years later didn't mention the parents, but they were there looking for their son. What happened to him? How did the body get back into an area where the sheriff was adamant that they had searched and it wasn't there? Friends, you're not going to carry an adult back and forth in there without being seen. And to carry somebody around at 10,000 feet, unless you're Superman, you're not going to do it. It's physically excruciating. So, those are the 3 cases today. I hope you'd share this with your friends, social media sites, etc. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. And God's willing, I'll be back soon. Huck just walked out, didn't want to be seen. See you soon. Paulides out.